Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Boat People is over. A photograph. Take one when I die. I won't mind then.
將啲錢俾間夫人，話佢聽，我要翻去個地裏，用唔着㗎啦，而且唔夠。呢啲錢用嚟做咩嘅？買路錢。你要離開越南咩？
Andy, this is the last film in our Ann Hui series.
The last film in our Ann Hui series and the first film in our journalist series. This is another crossover episode.
A crossover episode.
That's right.
Oh, this is very, very exciting. We're talking about Boat People, 1982 film that takes us to Vietnam through the eyes of a photojournalist who returns a few years after covering the events in Da Nang as the Chinese take over and the U.S. is gone. So things are already set up to be great in Boat People, right? great.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be an interesting film to talk about. It's definitely much earlier. This is the earliest film in our Ann Hui series that we have talked about, and but certainly a film that's gotten a lot more notice for her. And this is a film. I mean, the Criterion Collection recently announced that they are including this in their collection soon. Not in time for us to look at their release of it, but it will be a part of their collection, which is great. And so, yeah, definitely an important film in Hui's filmography. And so it'll be a nice one for us to end on and have this conversation about it.
Do you remember what our thinking was in that we did not do these in chronological order? I mean, we just last week did Our Time Will Come, which was 2017, and now we're going back to 1982. What happened there?
Well, we started with her 2011 film because it was part of our crossover. It was a crossover with our 10-year anniversary.
It was a crossover.
And then we did the other two chronologically from 1990 to 2017, and we ended in 1982 because it's another crossover episode. It's purely because of crossovers.
It's because of us, not her. Got it. Well, I know that this is your favorite part of the show now. What do you think I thought of Boat People?
I think that you enjoyed the film. I think that you found it to be an interesting look at the life of a journalist in a conflict situation, particularly when the journalist does what a journalist shouldn't do and build a connection with the people that they are there documenting. Fascinating perspective. Andy, I also think that
I
like how you said that like it hadn't even occurred to you. Like, oh, yeah, I guess that is what this film's about.
A journalist is in this movie? I think that you thought that the film was interesting, that you found a real connection to the personal locale, and that I think that you, more importantly, I think that you liked it more than Our Time Will Come. How about that? Maybe even just a little bit more, but I think you liked it more.
Okay, interesting.
Right. Very exciting.
This film was rated R when it was released here in the States, probably because of a lot of the awful things that happen in the film. There's definitely a lot of violence, a lot of shocking situations involving children and prisons, and just a lot of stuff that, you know, it's war, it's brutal. Do you want to watch this movie and help us out? Well, if you see an Apple or an Amazon link to this movie in the show notes, just click on it. It will take you right to their site, and you can rent or buy the movie. When you do this, we get a little piece in return.
And make sure to check out the merch store, truestory.fm/TNR merch. You can get shirts, stickers, mugs, masks, pillows. Yes, even pillows. With everything that we're coming up with to celebrate the films that we're talking about on this show. truestory.fm/TNR merch.
And we are now featuring audio reviews from you, our dear listeners. Just send us your 30-second audio file to reviews@truestory.fm as soon as you watch the movie. And really, it can be any of the movies upcoming for us through the rest of the season. And we'll hold on to those. And when it comes time to get the show out there, we will drop your review in the episode. You got to get them in quick, though. We do record about 2 weeks in advance. So just make sure you get them in as soon as you can and send it to reviews@truestory.fm.
You can find our watch list over on our Letterboxd HQ page at letterboxd.com/thenextreel. And that is where you can find out what we're talking about coming up. You can find out all the lists of all the movies we've been talking about, lots of all the reviews that we've been doing over on Letterboxd, and we absolutely love Letterboxd. It really is the perfect social network for movie lovers. And if you fall in love with it like we've fallen in love with it, you can upgrade, get rid of all those ads, and sleep well at night knowing that you're supporting a fantastic team over at the Letterboxd HQ by becoming a paying member. Upgrade to Pro or Patron and get 20% off with our code NEXTREEL at checkout. or you can just visit thenextreel.com/letterboxed, which will take you to the upgrade page, and the 20% off will already be applied. This counts for new users and renewals. So if you have a renewal coming up, check your account. If it's I think it's within 30 days, you can upgrade or you can renew and get that discount applied as well.
And hey, it is a brand new year. And what better way to kick things off? I know you had it on your list of New Year's resolutions. So, sign up and become a member of the show. We are using Patreon's Memberful platform. It integrates right into our very own website. You just go over to truestory.fm/TNR membership. You can sign up to become a member either month to month or at the annual rate, and you'll get all sorts of wonderful goodies.
So many bonus episodes that you get that we talk about that are available only to members who sign up and become supporters. We've got our Flick Chart re-ranking. We've got our retake episodes that come out at the end of each season. We've got bonus movies each month. A bonus movie that we talk about to fill in a hole in an old season that we just need to talk about to shake things up. We've got a lot of bonus episodes that are just for our members. And you can become a member and get access to all those in your very own personal bespoke podcast feed, where you get stuff that just doesn't show up in the main podcast feed on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, et cetera, et cetera. Just head to truestory.fm/TNR membership to learn more about membership tiers. The most it'll cost you is $5 a month or $55 a year. Thank you so much to our current members. And if you're just considering something new in the new year, we appreciate you thinking of us. Okay, Andy, let's talk about boat people.
I want you to start because you studied journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And this
Sure
film is
did.
about journalists. It's a crossover, as we said, with our journalist series. That is the next one. A perspective coming from somebody who kind of is in the know as far as the world of journalists.
Well, all right.
I mean, I know you were never a wartime photographer.
I was
still.
I was never a wartime photographer, and my focus was on television news, and so I spent very little time in print and still work. But I also, for the last many years, have also worked as a professional still photographer and videographer as well, even after I left the world of news. And I have to tell you, I really like this character. I have met a lot of photojournalists, and I find that there is a very wide spectrum of journalists and of photojournalists, and that spectrum is like the things that they choose to cover, like from whether they're altruists, like they're actually out to cover the news because they feel like the work that they're doing changes things, and those who are strictly capitalists, like they're out doing the work and telling those stories and taking those risks because they're paid to do so. And at some point in between, they just sort of slide back and forth on that scale. And usually it comes with age. They really fit the trope. Like they write these tropes for a reason, that the longer you're in the work, the sort of less altruistic you become, because it's easy to get jaded in anything. And when you watch horrible things all the time, it's easy to feel like you have a distinct lack of control in your level of influence. This character, I think you can make a case that our character in this movie comes off as, he's still an altruist. He has a lot of experience. He worked in the war, but he's still back as an altruist. He feels like he's trying to do good. And his journey through being a tool of the state, right, being essentially a propagandist, to rediscovering his purpose and taking pictures of things that really matters, is, I think, an interesting one. The question is, to what degree the movie is able to capture that and make you feel something alongside him in his work. So I found I really had an affinity for him. I think he's an interesting character, and George Lamb is an interesting actor to me. So I did connect with it. But I do, as I was reading up on the film, I read a lot of critiques of him as a photojournalist, that he's not believable, that he's, all the way down to the, would he really give up his camera equipment? Well, I think, sure. I found that believable for this character in this situation. I don't have a critique of that stuff. But I do think it is, it's an interesting take on this character, and it fits on the spectrum. There was nothing in the way this character was played that surprised me negatively, and I think I call that a win. How did it hit you?
I really enjoy these stories about these characters who are in a wartime situation, and their view of things shift as they're kind of going on this journey and taking the pictures and seeing what's actually happening and everything. And I found him to be an interesting character because of the way that he comes in, as you said, he's kind of already a prominent wartime photographer. And so I don't think it's so much that he's a propagandist, but it's definitely one of those things where he's following along with what they tell him. Like, they bring him to this place. Oh yeah, here's the new economic zone. Look how happy these children are. And like and to a certain extent, it's like less a propagandist and more somebody who's been in it long enough to kind of just become a little lose some of his sense of things, like the passion that he had as a youth, and just kind of like becomes like he just follows along almost naively with what he's being told without realizing or almost having forgotten that, you got to dig a little deeper sometimes, which was interesting because it all, like, when he starts having those conversations and after he talks to his Japanese friend who's in town and kind of is reminded, oh yeah, I should get out and talk to some of the real people, like the plight of the real people who are doing things, and that was the shift for him. It's like suddenly as he starts hanging out with those people, that's where he starts getting those clues. Oh, you're looking at NEZ number 16? Well, you're looking at the one that they show everybody who comes in from out of the country.
Yeah, that's the floor model.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
But see, Andy, and I think that's where you can make the case that if you buy into his character, like, this is where I would have a quibble, right? That they've made the case that this character is a successful war journalist, right? But he was also, like, they like him. They have him back because he told a story that was in their favor, right? That's why he gets the access that he does. But if he really was a war photographer, like, I expect him to have more demonstrable experience and cynicism in what they're telling him. And so when he tells them and tells his handler, I'd like to go to these places without my handler, I'd like to go unescorted, and they let him do it. My read of that, and this hinges on my like of his character and his and appreciation of the film, is that he's doing that because he has that experience. But many of the critiques I've read of the film say that he's wildly too naive and is being played, and it's only accidental that he actually is awakened to these atrocities that are still going on, that they're still at war, even though they're, the war is supposedly over. So I guess that's my question for you is, what is your take on that conflict? Like, is he really naive, like so many of the critiques say in your head, or do you follow sort of my line of thinking that I need him to be more experienced, and so I believe his arc?
Well, I guess, and perhaps we incorrectly started talking about this character as a wartime photojournalist. I mean, we see him when China comes in, and then he comes back, 3 years later to kind of just take pictures and stuff. But he's always just described as a photojournalist. And he doesn't really talk about, he talks about, getting to travel the world and stuff, but he doesn't talk about going into all sorts of conflict situations, It's not...
Yeah, there's none of that like PTSD that many war journalists have.
Yeah,
right?
We're not watching, the journalists in Salvador who are, hopped up on drugs because they're in such intense conflict all the time. This is a person who just is more of a photojournalist and
like a features guy.
Exactly. And so maybe that's the angle, is that he's not a wartime journalist. And so he's the one who is sent over to kind of, just to kind of take pictures. How is everything going over there? Just to kind of get those sorts of stories. And yeah, they show him the floor model and he's just not that smart. He doesn't have the sense of that sort of thinking. And so I think that this film was his awakening. And to that end, I really enjoyed the character. I enjoyed his awakening, and I really didn't have any issues that apparently some of these other people that have some gripes with that find in the film. I enjoyed watching him kind of discover what's really going on. And for me, I found it to be very effective.
Well, I feel like, and I don't want to belabor this point too much, but I feel like you have just introduced yet another opportunity for internal conflict for me. Even if he is a features guy, he is revisiting Vietnam 3 years after being there, after the quote liberation, and that was wartime. Like, how does he not see the like the end of the atrocities of war, right? Like, how does he not see what has happened to the country when he was there at that time? That's all I'm asking. Like, even if he's there shooting something for, Japanese Vogue, like you have to.
All we can base it on is what we see in the film. And when we see him in the film, he is there on the streets with all of the Vietnamese people waving Chinese flags, celebrating the Chinese tanks and soldiers rolling through the streets. And that's the only thing we see of him. So we can't speak to the fact that he was there to witness, the devastation or anything like that. The only thing that he really sees that he takes a picture of that stuck with him is that kid on crutches walking through the alley. But that, again, doesn't necessarily speak to much of anything. And so it really is there. I mean, he is there for celebration, and it's hard to read too much into like what else could he have seen while he was there. We just don't know because we're not given that.
Well, I think I absolutely agree with you, and I think that is a reason for so much of the critique of the film, and in terms of his character's naivete, because I find it hard to believe that he wouldn't have seen other stuff besides the parade. I think it's an open question that the film, you're right, does not answer. But if you're going to poke holes in this awakening for him, that he's only just now realizing that the Vietnamese, the ruling party is Chairman Ho is just not great to their own people. Well, that seems dubious.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you can read into it, I guess, all the live long day. But in context of the film and what we're given, the way that it affects his character arc over the course of the film, I don't have any issues with it. I think it works in context of this story that we've been presented as a person who's there. He sees a celebration. He comes back 3 years later. Everything seems great. And then he digs deeper and finds that there's a lot more. In context of the story, I think it works great. In context of reality, sure.
Yeah.
I see the point.
Well, and I think we're in total agreement on this. I just find I need him to be this guy in the beginning, and I need to move on from it, because I find once he meets the family and the aforementioned boat people, I find that's when the story actually picks up and gets interesting to me, and that relationship and his connection to them is the one that I'm most sort of have a greater affinity to or for, and so that's when the thing gets better.
Well, I mean, that's the inciting incident. That's all of 10 minutes into the film. So
yeah, right.
There's not a whole. It's not like you had to wait like 3/4 of the film for that to happen.
No, of course. But that's why, like, I feel like if you can't get over the photojournalist stuff, you're not going to have a great experience with the movie. And for me, I was able to get over it, so I had a better experience with the movie. That's all.
But what, like the whole setup of the film, though, like I really find it interesting watching him when he does return, and for me too, because like I'm there with him. I'm the naive person who like I wasn't really. Speaking to what we talked about last week with Our Time Has Come, like everything that happened in Vietnam after the U.S. departed, like all of this stuff, like I knew loose stories of and stuff from history classes, but not much. And so getting to kind of see him come in and get taken to this, new economic zone number 16 and seeing the kids singing and they're all so happy and everything seems great. And life seems like, wow, the Chinese have really changed things for the better here in Vietnam. And so I enjoyed that. And it is interesting, though, when you see those moments, like when he's out on the street and he sees the police taking a family into a truck and marking their door and things like that. And he starts seeing more and more of these markings and things like that, like I was as curious about as he was. Like a lot of interesting things, like what is going on here? Like I felt the film did a really great job of creating a story that allowed him to very much be the audience surrogate, so that we were coming into this seeing these things kind of for the first time and trying to go, well, what is really happening here? And as he dug deeper, it really increased my appreciation for the film because I was able to really get a sense of this world and everything that's going on. So I found the storytelling structure for me, where it worked really well.
So what do you think about his relationship with, particularly with the girl?
Cam Nguyen?
Yeah.
I really liked it. It's very interesting. We see him and these kids again as he's kind of initially walking around. He sees, it looks like kind of a mom feeding her kids, and then a bunch of people come in and knock stuff over, and all these kids just start eating the noodles off the ground. Like they come running in to just kind of steal everything. And one of them is Cam Nguyen and her younger brother. And he starts following her because she's such an interesting presence. And so we kind of get to know her, their mother, and the youngest kid as he creepily follows them into their house. Oh, I'm totally allowed to be here. I just want to take some pictures. a little presumptive of him as the photographer to just be walking into people's houses to take pictures.
Right. No, that happens all the time in my house. Don't they do that in Phoenix?
Again, those crazy Portlanders. And then her older brother shows up, Knock, who is much more street smart, has some English under his belt, and kind of creates this situation that allows him to take pictures of them without seeming like he is just taking pictures of them, which would get them into trouble, like they had actually worked something out. And so it's interesting to see the way that relationship forms, but then how these kids really develop this relationship with him. And it turns into this thing of him just kind of meeting up with them every day and really getting a sense of the world and all the stuff that's going on and all the scrounging that's happening and how, these assassinations take place in this back alley that they've all nicknamed the chicken farm, and how they basically help a guy back there to kind of clean everything up, and they clean out all the pockets and take off all the watches and all the valuables and stuff, and then get some money from the guy who's doing the cleanup. It's like, God, just like horrible things like that you start getting a sense of. And so that's, absolutely. This is why I think the film works so well for me, because you really get a strong sense of life there, especially for young kids and, just in economic hardships.
Yeah, I think that's a piece that I think really plays well for me, which is that exactly that we get to see how these kids and the people of the community and of the country have adjusted to life post-war, and just through our cameraman or our photojournalist's eyes, we get to be awakened to the strife that they are dealing with, to the things that are completely normal to them that are completely foreign to us. And for that, I think that stuff plays well for me, and maybe that's why I'm able to write off some of the other stuff even more. I think she, specifically Season Ma playing Cam Nguyen, is fantastic. fantastic. I adored her performance in this movie. I really, really did. And even more so than George Lamb, I think she, she's sort of the white rabbit, right, that we follow into deeper and deeper into the movie along with George Lamb. And I could not get enough of her on screen. I thought she was great.
Very, very young and fits the role. I mean, she's got one of those faces that, I mean, without saying anything, just looking, at something. I mean, it carries a lot of weight in her look. And so, it was very powerful to kind of watch her performance here as she was trying to figure him out initially and then developing that connection with him. And then going back and forth. Like, there were times when she wants him out. There are times when she wants him back in their life. And all the way through to the end, when you have that final shot of her and her little brother on the boat, sailing to presumably a safer place. That shot of them in the sun as they're on the boat. I mean, that's what a powerful way to end the film, and just see their face. And it's not like they're smiling or anything. It's just that face. And it was, really, this is the sort of child performance that you see. And it's just like, I love seeing that kids can pull stuff like this off. It was very, very well done in a very adult film.
So this was another thing that I did not know about before this movie. I didn't know anything about New Economic Zones, the New Economic Zone program. Had you ever heard of this?
Well, it is one of those things that I feel like I had read, like in some history or something, but I didn't know what it meant. And I really don't think I had a good handle on it at all. And so it was an interesting thing to kind of watch how it played out here. These different communities that they kind of were creating.
The way I understand it, and based on very limited internet research so far, but very curious about learning more, that the Vietnamese communist government, after the fall of Saigon, moved northerners to the south in these new regions, right? The new economic zones, in order to populate the country with the inhabitants of North Vietnam, to the tune of 1 million people. 1 million northerners moved south after the fall and into these new economic zones. And to make that happen, they took 1 million southerners who were living there already out of their homes and moved them to the woods, to the forest. This was a forced replacement effort. That's what the New Economic Zones program were. But they say this was, these were volunteers, people who volunteered to move into the mountains and start new communities. I pretty much don't know any more than that. All I know is it doesn't sound great, but that's what it was. So in terms of this story, we have people. Is it your understanding that the people that we meet in terms of the family and that they were forced out and wanted to move into an economic zone, or get out of, or get on a boat, become a boat person, right, a refugee, and get out of Vietnam altogether?
Which family you're talking about? Are you talking about the family we're following in the film?
Yeah, the family we're following. Well, I know we have, because we have both To Min, Andy Lau's character, right? He just wants to get out of the country.
Yeah. He had been in one of the NEZs and was given permission to leave because he was ill and was supposed to be healing up. But as it turns out, he, was basically getting money so he could get back in to use his escape method that he had and flee on a boat.
Now, and that was a part that was a little bit confusing to me. He had money implanted in his body.
Yeah, he had those gold plates. Well, I think he put them in his wound that he had. Which was supposed to be his easy money exit, right? That was his whole thing.
If we've learned nothing from this movie, don't ever do that.
Ugh.
Hide gold in your open, festering wounds.
It was pretty brutal. Pretty brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, but I want to go back to Cam Wong and her family, right? Were they always residents, or had they been moved? Had they been forced migrated onto the coast?
No, I think that they were always residents, and they didn't want to go into the NEZs because they heard how brutal they were, and
yeah.
Even though he was just like, "What are you talking about? Like, they're great," because again, he'd only seen the floor model, and so that was a lesson for him that, there were more than just these things. There were also these prison camps and just so many other things going on that really was not talked about. Very brutal in the way that China was running Vietnam at the time. But they were just living in poverty, trying to make a living. And, the kids were doing most of the work. Mom, when we meet, she's ill, and her friend convinces her to become a prostitute. And so that's kind of where Mom ends up at in the film, making more money, but having to sell herself, which of course she ends up paying for by the time we get to the end of the film, which is, it's a pretty shocking thing. But I think that's their goal, is to just survive and not have to get forced out. I don't think they're trying to leave. I think that they are just, whatever we need to do to survive, which is why the kids are, she's, getting pieces of sugar cane that she can sell, or, fish that she can trade, or whatever. Like, it's always like, if I pay this much for this, I can sell it later for that much. And, always trying to find ways to make a little money, and then also helping out at the chicken farm. So it's, it's a very difficult living. And that's, I think, the one of the powerful things of the film is just getting a sense of how hard this world was for these people.
Yeah. Oh, truly. The movie, I think, captures that very, very well. And so we start to, we make the transition as, our photojournalist starts to learn the truth. He gets access to more stuff. He goes without his handler, and he gets to see more of the hardships that are going on as he follows our White Rabbit character into this stuff. And then things start getting harder for him. But he is always pretty quickly rescued. What's your take on the big transitions?
It's interesting, like his story, the journey that he has is pretty interesting. And, he's really given access because, he has permission by the head of the head officer of the area. He's was educated in France and a Revolutionary War hero, and pretty much like the leader of the area. And he's the one who gives Akutagawa the right to basically go wherever he wants and take whatever pictures he wants. And meanwhile, Officer Nguyen's the people, like the people who had been Akutagawa's handlers before he was given free rein, they're the ones that seem much more in line with the Communist Party. Officer Nguyen seems a little jaded with everything, and seems like he might know the sorts of pictures that are going to get taken, and kind of seems like, you know what, I just don't care. Like, he just seems kind of like, it is what it is. It's not great, and maybe it needs to be out. There's an element of that to him that I found very interesting, but I kept wondering, and so I kind of, I mean, this is one of those stories you really get a sense of, like, I pretty much know how the story's going to end. It's not going to end well, at least for our photographer, because he's getting so wrapped up in everything that's happening here.
Yeah,
and because the handlers, like, outside of talking to Officer Nguyen, the two of them very much seemed like concerned. Like, these are the sorts of photos that could really cause trouble. And he's trying to stir things up as a revolutionary. What should we do about the photographs? And I kept wondering, are we going to build to a place where, like, he's getting ready to leave and, like, all of his film is gone or gets taken away, or something where he doesn't actually get to reveal his photos? Like, that was, I figured, going to be the light version of the film. The tougher version of the film, which is certainly more in line with what we get, is that in some capacity he's trying to help and ends up getting killed, which is more what we get. And so it was, I mean, it's an interesting journey for him that he goes on. And I liked the way it played out. And I especially enjoyed his relationship with Officer Nguyen because I found that character to be so interesting. The way that it kind of, allowed for more than it perhaps should have from somebody in that office.
Yes, absolutely. I thought that was really interesting, and you could tell, and that's where I think the characters that we have, from the handler to Officer Nguyen to the consulate folks that we come into contact with at their regular lunch, I found them really interesting because they showed sort of the spectrum of challenge that they have in dealing with what everybody knows is going on in their country. That some of them are, clearly demonstrating a more humane sort of reaction, and I think that's one of the pieces that makes the latter half of the film interesting, and that allows me to buy in to the fact that our photojournalist is able to execute on his more altruistic bent in a believable way for me, that he's trying to help. And the movie certainly isn't afraid of taking us down that darker road where, something goes horribly wrong and he ends up, on the dock, so to speak. I also think we have enough instances where there is sort of this mistaken identity thing going on where they beat him up before he's able to pull out his get out of jail free card. And that by the time we get to the end of the film, there is a legitimate sort of belief that he might be rescued at the end, but for lack of these, kind of rogue guards chasing him, that, a rogue shot that ends up lighting up the canister. I think that's great dramatic tension that I think they leverage well in the final moments of the film.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it just was one of those moments where I'm like, why are you running? Just, tiptoe away quietly. Why? When he takes off and I'm like, I know you're trying to get away, but those guards are just around the corner.
Yeah.
Be a little more subtle.
Yeah. Well, and that's what the movie is dancing on, right? Which is whatever you think of the first half of the movie, like the entire sentiment of the film is based on a veil of gauze, right? That the central ruling party is trying to keep down over everybody's face. And as it gets peeled back just a little bit, it just evaporates for our protagonist here. And I think that makes it, painful and exhilarating to watch him get out of that and to watch him realize that the only thing he can do to live with himself is to help and support those people who also have to get out of the horrible strife and the life choices that they're forced to make, and the prostitution and everything, and just the kids who are taking watches and money off of corpses in the public square. I mean, all of those things are what they're escaping from, and I think that that is played so well in particularly the third act. That is redeemed really, really well for me.
Yeah, really is. A lot of those moments, and when the young girl, Cam Nuong, is all dressed up and helping out at the noodle shop or wherever it is, and
right.
she wants to see his hotel room and all of that, and it's like, where is this going? And then all of a sudden she wants to wash her feet so she doesn't get his bed dirty, and it's like at 14 she is so world wise in such a shocking way that it's horrific that she's at this point where I'm here to sell myself to you now. And it's like, geez, wow. Just shocking the way that these moments play.
Well, those moments, I mean, speaking of the veil of that's over his eyes, right? When he goes to see where all the children are singing about our glorious Chairman Ho, and then goes back at night and sees those same children sleep piling in the nude in these giant barracks.
Yeah.
That's one of those horrifying twists of that when we get to see him awakening, see his awakening.
Yeah. And I mean, and that whole thing plays, there's that interesting twist there where there's the old guy who works there who's walking around with GI's boots, around his neck. And he's like, well, I've been saving these. I'm not going to wear them. I'm going to be buried in them.
Yeah.
And then when he comes back, like the guy who had been the head, that old guy had died. And then the guy who was the head of the place has taken his boots. It's like, oh, they were just such nice boots, and is wearing them. And it's like, it's interesting, like the way that these little things play out in a way where, I don't know, I think it speaks to a lot of the views on war and on communism. And I don't know, it was an interesting little side note in there as well.
And, leading into our to the end of the film, the climax of the film. So he is the diesel canister he's carrying blows up, and he is covered in burning diesel fuel and ends up dying on the dock. And that's a horrible thing. And yet there isn't a small part of me that watches the kids on the boat. Right. They are now boat people. Right.
Yeah, they're exactly. That was the journey of the film, is to them becoming boat people. Just and it's we meet them and they're kind of living on a docked boat, right? That's kind of turned aside on the side, but they're boat people only now, and boat people referring to the fact that they are refugees, fleeing Vietnam, and so much death has occurred to the boat people just trying to get out of Vietnam. And we've seen this any place there are, refugees get on a small boat and venture out into the open water, whether it's Vietnam or Cuba or wherever it is. It is horrific. And so we watch our protagonist die on the dock only to turn around and watch these kids hopeful that they're going to find, freedom in a freer land. And it's just like only we know how bad life can be for refugees fleeing the country, right? It's horrible. And so it doesn't get better. Just because the kids get out, that doesn't make it better. That doesn't make this a happy ending movie. Well, I mean, no, especially, geez, look at what happened when Toe got onto his boat to flee, right?
Yes, that's a great example, right?
He escapes the NEZ number 15 and gets onto the boat, and they're sailing down the river, and it's surrounded by two boats of soldiers who open fire and kill every single person on board, including To Min. And then they, just like the chicken farm, they start pulling off all the watches and everything else on these people. I mean, it's just because you made it onto the boat and you're getting out doesn't mean that you make it.
Right.
And I think at the end of the film, it's a view of hope that we have for these kids, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're free yet. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have a better life. All it means is that they've made it out of this particular situation, and very much paints a portrait for this whole concept of boat people that had been fleeing at this particular point in time. And so many of them that, the term was coined. And so it's one of those things where it's like, this is what leads people to do that sort of thing.
Well, this is where I think it could be a mistake to focus too much on the naivete of our photojournalist central character at the expense of what the movie is actually trying to say about the lives of the people of Vietnam after the glorious Chairman Ho was in charge, and the rifts that continued for decades, for generations of people who were affected by the war. And so that's really what the movie is so much about, and that perspective. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of stuff that people endured. And, but you do get to that point where you're like, I have to figure out how to get out. And that's one thing I loved. It was interesting because we, at a certain point, we do kind of start shifting a lot more attention than I expected to To Min's character as he goes off to NEZ 15 and following him all the way through his attempt at fleeing the country. And so to that end, it was interesting because, to a certain extent, Akutagawa was helping him as well as helping these kids all flee. And we do kind of get the two stories, but it is a brutal, brutal place. And watching so many of the elements of To Min's story, like he's trying to steal his camera that gets him into trouble. And that's only because he was trying to get enough money so that he could get out, which I think is really what gave Akutagawa the idea that he could hook up with this barkeeper, this Chinese barkeep that Officer Nguyen always hangs out with, who's kind of in kind of the black market, helping people get out, is what it seems, or get passes to where they need. She very much seems to be kind of that person. But she's connected to To Min. They're having a relationship. And but the whole thing with trying to get the money with her so they could get out, so that his buddy, who's also an NEZ-15, could get out. Like, there were a lot of these elements of just the struggle of what it takes to actually be able to even consider the idea of getting onto a boat to get out.
Right. So I think overall, all of that leads me to a really satisfying sort of educational experience, but recognizing too that this is a movie that's made in a kind of another sort of complicated circumstance, right? Her as a Hong Kong filmmaker making this movie, like everything that we've sort of read leads me to think, gosh, what are the trade-offs that she made to make a movie that was discussing these issues that are important to China and their portrayal of those things. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, in terms of this movie, as like, what angle is China supporting that they are allowing this movie to be made?
Well, I mean, it's definitely interesting. I mean, Ann Hui, this is the film that kind of got her into that whole Hong Kong New Wave list of directors. I think we've talked about a few of them on the show before, like Wong Kar-wai. We've never talked about John Woo, but, we've certainly talked about John Woo, if you know what I mean. And so I think that there's an element of her kind of being in a director, or being in a role as a director in this period where, there certainly was a relationship with China, but it wasn't in the same situation that it was, when she was making Our Time Will Come in 2017, right? Is definitely kind of a different position that she was in. But that being said, it is a film that was made in cooperation with the Chinese government. And to that end, some people saw this as anti-Vietnam propaganda that she was spreading. And so, it's interesting. You start looking at the different perspectives that people bring to it. And I don't know. I find that, I don't know. I don't know if I felt that so much about the film, but I can certainly see how people would see that. But Ann Hui herself, she got a lot of the ideas for this because she was making a documentary for one of the local Hong Kong networks, and did a lot of interviews with Vietnamese refugees about life after in this period of time. And then she did this film, the story of Wu Viet, the year before this, that Chow Yun-fat was in, about a Vietnamese boat person who was in Hong Kong. And then she did this film, and that's actually, they call it her Vietnam Trilogy, and this is the third of that series. And so she even had permission from the Chinese government to film on Hainan Island, the first Hong Kong movie to be filmed in communist China. So I can see how, because of a lot of those elements, that people end up feeling there is an angle that she's coming in with. And I think that's part of the problem.
Right. Well, the fact that Chow Yun-fat, was like, it was one of those actors, that risked being banned from the movie and chose not to be in the movie for that reason. Like, that's an interesting perspective. Like, you're making a movie where there are actors who are afraid of their participation in a particular film because of the position of the state.
Yeah, right.
I think that's a shadow that is like looming over her productions on these topics. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, very much.
I don't think they do any. There's nothing wrong with putting Andy Lau in this movie. Big fan of Andy Lau.
Yeah, exactly.
It is what it is. Anything else hot you need to talk about on this thing?
I don't think so. Other than, this is really the film that put Ann Hui on the map as far as getting out into the world and really kind of kickstarting her much larger career. So,
What do you think of the music, Long Wing Fai?
I liked it. I felt like the music in this film was more cohesive across the entire film, and so I felt it worked well.
It had, I agree with you. It didn't have the sweeping theme, but it's interesting that, same composer as A Simple Life, and was not as much on board with the Simple Life score. So we're looking at first and last scores, right? Lo Wing Fai, this was the first score, and Simple Life was the last in 2011.
With Ann
interesting.
Hui.
With Ann Hui, right?
Yeah.
Well, and also the last credited score. First and last credited in their filmography. Literally,
Gotcha.
First and last.
Literally.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, literally.
Gotcha. Interesting.
So, yeah. All right.
Well, we will be right back, but first, our credits.
The next reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Hanjo Gabler, Oriel Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at d-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, and imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. And now, let's see if Andy could find anything about anything on this movie. Andy, did it get any awards?
This film did okay with its award run. Again, we've talked about this a lot. There's a certain... I wonder where that line is, where all of a sudden everybody realizes, hey, we should start our own awards. So this is still in that early phase when there aren't as many awards out there. It did have 6 wins and 7 other nominations. The ones that let's just focus. Virtually all of them center on the Hong Kong Film Awards. 12 of its 13 nominations and wins happened at the Hong Kong Film Awards. It did win the top foreign film at the National Board of Review here in the U.S. But over at the Hong Kong Film Awards, let's just walk through that, because it won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best New Performer for Season Ma, Best Art Direction. And then the nominees where it was nominated but did not win. The first one is George Lam. He was nominated for Best Actor but lost to Carl Maka for Mad Mission. Cora Miao was nominated for Best Actress, but lost to Becky Lam in Lonely 15. And Season Ma was also nominated for Best Actress, but lost to Becky Lam. That's weird. She was nominated in both categories, I guess. The film was nominated for Best Cinematography, but lost to He Lives by Night. Best Film Editing also lost to He Lives by Night. And, I guess it was Best New Performer that Season Ma won. But she lost Best Actress. So there
Best
you go.
Actress, sure.
The film was nominated for Best Original Score, but lost to Life After Life. And that's it. So, pretty good run. I mean, this really kind of started that run of big awards for Ann Hui at the Hong Kong Film Awards, where I think I said back in our first episode, she's won like the Best Director award, I think more than anyone else, like 4 times. So, she's very popular there.
Well, and it's amazing because clearly she made this movie for free, right? Because if there's no budget, that's what that means.
That's what that means. Yeah, it's very frustrating. The end of the series, once again, no budget information. It's frustrating, but it speaks to the time. It also speaks to the fact that a lot of the stuff that from the Hong Kong area, we're just not getting that sort of budget information. This movie opened October 22nd, 1982 in Hong Kong and China. It doesn't look like it was released here in the States, but I can't quite tell because it does have an R rating, so I'm not sure where that conflict is. Regardless, all I could find was that the film did earn $2.3 million overseas, which is $6.1 million in today's dollars. Like I said, I don't have all the numbers, but I would like to assume it was a profitable film for Hui, as it certainly did well for her in the award circles, and really kicked off her career as a new wave director.
I like this movie quite a bit. I don't know if it was. Well, Was it my favorite of our Ann Hui series? I didn't like what the last one, Our Time Will Come, as much. What did we do right before that? Oh, I like The Simple Life. Song of the Exile. Yeah, there were I had issues with that too. I think this is right up at the top for me. I like this one quite a bit. So I'm excited to see how this one shakes out.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to be right back, and we're going to talk about our ratings and reviews. But first, here is the trailer for our next movie, Merrily We Go to Hell.
I'm a little drunk. Will you excuse me?
I think everyone here is a little drunk, but I'll excuse you.
Now, loose hands.
Terry, you're impossible. What did you do with the ring?
I ought to be shot. I lost it. Well, merrily we go to hell.
Merrily, you stop this and go to work. Come on.
Madam, have you no answer for me?
Sir, if I said yes, I should mean no. And if I said no, I should mean yes. But my silence is all true, and for you.
It's your husband's play. Applaud.
I can't. I'm too happy.
You have a funny way of showing it.
Now, dear, merrily we go to hell.
Merrily, you go to your girlfriend.
I'm still going to her unless you stop me.
I won't stop you.
If you love me, you will. Sweetheart,
Yes, dear.
don't you think I've done enough today?
Don't let anything go wrong, Joan. Or if it does, take my advice and get out in time.
All right, Andy. How are you gonna handle Letterboxd? What are you gonna do to really make this review and this star rating shine?
I don't know. I felt like this film worked really well for me. I enjoyed these characters and the journey. I'm going to land on 4.5.
4.5?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. This is a really good film.
That's an extraordinary rating from you.
That extraordinary.
It's extraordinary.
If people look at my ratings, they'll realize it's really not that extraordinary. Kind of run of the mill. Oh, another 4.5 from Andy.
I would go as high, I think, as 3.5. And that'll take us to a 4 with a heart. 3.5 with a heart.
Okay, so that's exactly the same you gave A Simple Life. So you did kind of land in the same.
I think I did kind of land in the same place.
And the same that I gave to The Simple Life. So there you go.
Okay, so this was clearly your favorite of the whole set.
Well, this and A Simple Life, I both really enjoyed. Like the different stories, but I really connected with both of them a lot. Yeah. I think if I were to pick, it would be Boat People over A Simple Life, even though they're at the same rating. But I found it to be a real powerful story that I connected with quite a bit.
I think this is one of those cases where it just depends on what you're in the mood for. Like if I feel like that was such a wonderful sort of dramatic experience between those two people in The Simple Life, and it told such an interesting story of family. And this is a very different movie than that. So I think I don't know that I could pick one over the other, but it would depend very much on mood. But certainly I had a better time with these than our middle fare Song of the Exile and Our Time Will Come. So that was fine. We want to know what you think about. We want to know. So head over to the Show Talk channel in Discord, where we'll be talking about this movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins. Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And here we have our list of reviews, and I sorted mine by review activity. And this one is Philippe Furtado's 4-star review that comes in with 66 other likes on the review. And it doesn't include any profanity. So that's good for you.
Okay. Why don't you read it?
Ann Hui's horror. I'm reading it. I'm reading it.
Dancing around the bush here.
Ann Hui's horror movie look into post-war.
It has 73 words.
What are you doing? Now you are interrupting me. So now this is on you. This whole delay is your fault. Ann Hui's horror movie look into post-war Vietnam. It has Hui's usual empathy, but is far moodier than its realist reputation might suggest. One of the film's key concepts is turning Lamb's Japanese photographer into a blank, a vessel for images, but someone whose journey is completely secondary in relation to what he sees. I think that's a good way to put it, to reframe naivete in terms of filmmaking tool.
I like it. That's actually great.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a 4.5 by Rohan, which I think it speaks to a scene that we didn't talk about, but was the one moment in the movie where Hui suddenly was also doing some intercutting between different scenes, which it certainly is worth bringing up here. One of my favorite parts in this movie was the parallel scene of how he closed off his briefcase after placing the camera parts, while simultaneously the little kid's mom was being placed and sealed in the coffin. Devastating. And that is that moment where we have mom embarrassed and ashamed by admitting that she's a prostitute and then killing herself by grabbing a hook and driving it into her neck, intercut with her funeral as the daughter is standing over her. And then, as this review says, we also get that moment where he's putting his camera away. Powerfully done scene. The way that all of that was constructed was exceptional.
Yeah, that was really special. Ugh. Rough. There was a later review I just want to throw out, which was really talking about, and I'm not going to read it, but it's worth noting that there are some strong opinions about how high this movie rates as a perspective that is non-Western on Vietnam movies, and I think that's important. And I probably in that scope, right, this movie merits a higher rating. That, again, really showcases, for me, speaking personally, my ignorance about those other perspectives. And so, if anything, out of this movie and out of Our Time Will Come last week, I am really interested in learning more about, from filmmakers in this area, because I am a blank canvas on, really needing to fill some of those conceptual and historical holes. Powerful stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks, Letterboxd. You're the best. Andy, it's hard to believe we've been having weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
The Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals has links to purchase the source material behind our adapted film discussions. Your purchases there help support the show at no extra cost.
For the entirety of Season 11, we featured films directed by women.
The only exceptions were some of our member bonus episodes.
We talked about The Lure for our Horror Debuts series, which is a very loose adaptation of The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen.
Definitely miles from the Disney versions.
For our 10-year anniversary series, we covered We Need to Talk About Kevin, taken from the Lionel Shriver novel.
Man, that was brilliant.
And horrifying.
Yeah. The Journalist series included Merrily We Go to Hell and The Weight of Water, adapted from Anita Shreve's bestseller.
We filled some gaps in previous series with member bonus episodes on adaptations like Malcolm X, Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House, Cactus Flower, Wild at Heart, Life Force, and The Blues Brothers.
Our John Hurd series looked at a trio of adaptations: Chilly Scenes of Winter from the novel by Ann Beatty, Awakenings based on Oliver Sacks' nonfiction book, and Rambling Rose adapted from the Calder-Willingham novel.
2 films in our coming-of-age debut series were adapted from books: The Virgin Suicides from Jeffrey Eugenides and The Diary of a Teenage Girl, Phoebe Glockner's graphic novel.
We had Queen of Katwe for our sports series based on Tim Crothers' nonfiction book.
And Clueless kicked off our 90s comedy series, loosely adapted from Jane Austen's Emma.
It totally took place in the 90s, though. Find all of these books and more adaptations on our originals page at thenextreel.com/originals.
Start your next read from the movies we've covered. Visit thenextreel.com/originals today.